No problem.
All right. So I think there were some other people who said that they were gonna come, but I guess should we start with instructions now?
Why don't we wait a couple minutes to see if everybody can get online?
Yeah, like I didn't realize that there was 2 places where you can invite people.
You want to see there's still discussion going on the previous hangout, and you could tell people what's the link for the new one. And do you have the previous hangout that people were expecting to join? That one?
Oh, this has all the same people in it. This is everyone that was in the past one.
Okay, everybody's in?
Yeah.
See them.
No, I think it's just me and Adam. Yes.
People said that they were going to join.
Yeah.
Haven't joined yet.
So
if are they still waiting on that other hangout that you had posted about? That's what I'm saying.
I mean, if they did, like they would have known that I made a new one because I sent everyone who replied to it, sent them an invite to this new one.
Right, but that comes to their email, so they may not know to look at it. So if you go to the hangout that you have before.
Okay.
You guys still hear me, by the way?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry, I'm switching over to my cell phone since I'm going to have to leave the university in a few minutes. So, and apparently I need to brush my hair too.
Not this one. Okay. So now I can post on here.
Okay, so you should post a link to the new one.
Yeah.
What?
I think. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Okay. Posted it. Yeah. So should we just wait 5 minutes?
Yeah. Can you go back to the current hangout now?
Yeah.
Maybe you can meet with one of the other students after this, try to figure out what's going on with the hangout and how to get people. Like we need very clear instructions for how to join. Seems like.
Yeah. The problem was that when I sent the invite, I sent it. So I added people. Like when I made the hangout, I added people to the event, not the hangout itself. And so then people only got the option to watch the hangout instead of actually participating in it.
Right. So we could test it out with some of the other students and see if we can get it to work again later.
Okay.
So we don't have a problem this week.
Yeah. Yeah, so should we just wait?
Yeah, I guess we get a chance to.
Yeah.
You want to invite them again on that current one? So sometimes when we're doing the e-Nable ones, you have to keep inviting them.
Okay.
A couple times. I guess maybe you could make a circle of the people that you're inviting.
Do that. Okay. Should I just do it afterwards?
Yeah.
For now, I just
try to add more people now.
Yeah.
So go ahead and just send that invite and see what happens.
Yeah. Oh, we got another person join the call.
Like they say, level survey. I asked them if it's very unusual for this kind of it's a monitor and something else. I said, you yourself is closer to me and survey or not. And then there's a free response question which I think is going to be interesting. Is there anything else you want to and there's an option, I think one of the earlier ones is options like identify survey discussion. So, it's at least comparable to that. That's already a deep question.
The thing is with our foil, where you sell soda and did much better.
At least I'm looking at it as close to something that people are familiar with. And I don't want the paper to be about the social identities. I like to be about what we're doing. I don't want to send one scale. So I get us all we have. I can just say here, we're going to do. I think we're going to do. After we identify we'll just say, okay, here, I want you to you self-identify as on the next one, on the following issues, recommendations, this issue, once this issue tell us in 3 sentences,
Looks like we'll have
Okay, so we need to test this more like later today. I mean, can you just send it? All right. I think everybody.
Yep. Like with new update.
Back here. Just add people.
All right. So I guess we have more people.
Okay, why don't we get started?
Okay. P2 people just dropped out. What happened here?
They might be trying to reconnect.
There we go. Hi. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, awesome. I think Luke is muted.
Okay. I can't see you, but I can hear you. I don't know if that matters.
Can't see me.
But that may be just me. I don't know.
Like I'm able to see you, so I think that might be a connection issue. My point.
Could be. Yeah, that's. Oh, I got you now.
Okay,
Wait.
awesome. Okay, Alberto was here briefly, and then like I think his connection got lost or something. So I think he may be trying to rejoin. But I guess we can start now. Okay, so like I guess for today we're gonna begin with introductions, and then I'll sort of give an overview of what we're gonna do in this student researcher collaboration. So like my name's Akil. I'm a student at Rice University.
I'm Jordan Miller. I'm an assistant professor of bioengineering at Rice.
Hello, Gloria Gagola. I'm a pediatric hand surgeon at Shriners Hospital.
Awesome.
Adam, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Adam Arabian. I'm an assistant professor of engineering at Seattle Pacific University.
Awesome. And Luke, like I know it's a little bit loud where you are, but can you at least like write in the chat a brief introduction about yourself? Awesome. Okay. So
So the chat info won't be part of the broadcast. So if there's stuff in the chat, you should read it.
Okay.
So people can get it on the broadcast.
Okay. So for everyone listening to the broadcast, we also have with us Luke Johnston, who's a student researcher at the University of Maryland. All right. So I guess the purpose of this collaboration is to sort of get feedback on our respective projects. So like I know, speaking from personal experience, that it would be great to have like more eyes and more ears who are telling me how I can improve what I'm doing this summer, and I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way. So like I guess we should go around and discuss like what projects we're working on this summer. So like I'll start off first. I'm working on making a new e-Nable hand, which has 5 sort of like modifications. So like I'm basing off my hand on the Raptor Reloaded, and I'm going to be adding modifications so that it will close the fingers when the wrist is flexed upwards like this instead of flexed downwards.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so the reason for that is because it seems to be a more natural motion. It's called a natural wrist tenodesis. And a clear example is that like when you ride a bike, you don't ride holding like the handlebars like this. You ride holding up like that. And so that's one key modification that would be useful. Additionally, I'm working on changing the thumb position on the hands. So like right now the hands don't have a clear opposable thumb. Yeah. So right now, the hands don't have a opposable thumb. If you look at the existing Raptor Reloaded design, the thumb comes off at a flat angle to the. Can you see? Yeah, it comes off like flat to the palm. However, in our hands, the angle of the thumb joint is internally rotated into the palm to provide an opposable thumb. So I'm working on that. In addition to that, I'm working on like changing up the hands that you can have multiple grip positions. So working on tip-to-tip grip, key pinch grip, cylindrical grasp, and spherical grasp. And those are the main sort of things that I'll be working on this summer. How about you, Adam? Like, what sort of things are you working on?
Sure. So I've got 2 students that are working for me right now. They're wrapping up this quarter, and then I've got 5 that are working for me over the summer. The 2 that are working for me right now, I've got one that's iterating on the on a version of on an e-Nable hand that we put out. We don't plan on. We've never sort of designed around replacing anything. We're just mostly doing technical test beds. But if you look, there's a hand design we put out called the Falcon. There's a Falcon V2 Falcon hand. And so it might be worth looking at. It's got some of the stuff that you're looking at. We have a rotatable thumb position and a couple of other features in that. So anyway, I have one student that's wrapping up another turn on that, leveraging some lessons learned. I've got another student that is doing a parameterized version of the flexi hand. If you haven't seen the flexi hand, it's worth looking at. I may be talking to, yeah, so you've seen it. The issue with the flexi hand is when Steve made it, it's in the, he made a mesh mixer, which is very elegant and smooth, but it's not very practical for people who actually want to be able to modify geometry. So I have a student who's just finishing up creating a parameterized version in SolidWorks of the flexi hand. So both of those we should be putting out pretty soon. Then we've got finals because we're on the quarter system. So we got finals next week. And then my new students are kicking off. I've got one student is going to be working on a transradial variant of the e-Nable hand. I have an electrical engineer who's going to be working on a Myo drive for that transradial implementation. And then I've got a mechanical student who's going to be working on vocational adaptations. So the idea, most of my work, so a little context, I'm on the e-Nable medical advisory board. And so I see a lot of the stuff that comes through there, but where I spend most of my time is I'm technical director for a nonprofit that's working in Jordan with Syrian refugees. And so most of my interest revolves around addressing some of these developing world issues. And so what we see a lot of is there's a desire for hands, but there's also a desire for recapturing vocational functionality. So the problem with an e-Nable hand is even with locking systems, which we've worked on and haven't really gotten figured out, but even with a locking system, it's really hard, for instance, to hold a paintbrush all day. So if you want to be able to paint a house, the solution may not be, this is our theory, is not to make a hand that can hold a paintbrush, but to create a snap-on system or something like that that can hold tools and make it more suitable for someone who is a chef or wants to paint a house or whatever it is, so they can hold their tools better. So anyway, so a range of vocational adaptations that are, hopefully, if we do it right, it's kind of a quick snap-on to an existing e-Nable hand design.
Right.
And then I've got a couple of doublies that are working on some other prosthetic stuff that isn't really related to e-Nable. But we can talk about it if we want to. So.
All right. And Luke?
That's awesome.
Yeah, that sounds really awesome. Oh, Luke, you can read. Yeah, there we go. 3 successful. So Luke has printed 3 successful pairs of the Raptor model at the University of Maryland's Makerspace. And like over this summer, Luke, like what's your project that you want to work on? Okay, so like Luke is not sure what sort of projects for research are available. So like I guess the best way, at least in my opinion, like one way to figure out what projects are available is to go on the e-Nable research forums. So like R&D, and especially we could join the R&D hangouts. And then over the course of those, people will talk about existing problems and then like ways that what people are doing to fix it and problems out there that need to be fixed. Like Adam, is there anything else that you want to add about finding new projects?
No, I think that's great. I mean, I'd say that just observationally, the e-Nable community is big. I mean, it's like thousands and thousands of people, but you'll find there's really a very small group of people that are actively iterating on improving designs, and there's a desperate need for it. I would say, you know, if you look, the things that get repeated regularly are going to be cosmetic changes, locking schemes. You know, being able to, if you're holding something, you don't want to have to crimp your hand this way, or based on the work you guys are talking about, hold your hand either way you want to hold it. You don't want to hold it. You want to be able to, you know, put your hand in position, grasp, you know, the water bottle, and then have it hold no matter what I do with my wrist subsequently. I mean, that'd be a great thing to look at, but all that stuff is up there. I think, as you were saying, it's on the forums, and show up at the research groups. But there's a lot of need. So that may be what's intimidating, though. Sometimes is the number of problems, not the plethora of them, rather than the lack of them.
Mm-hmm. And actually, Adam, relating to the locking schemes idea. So, like, actually, this past week, I've been working on like a ratchet mechanism that will basically allow you to like lock your wrist, like lock your hands in a flex position, so you don't have to exert any other force to keep it in that way. So you worked on like locking mechanisms in the past, and like I'd love to know like what sort of ideas you tried, and like what worked and what didn't work.
So we did a hackathon here around e-Nable hands at the University of Washington a couple of months ago, and we had somebody who did a ratcheting mechanism, and it works. I mean, it could obviously work better than what you can figure out in 24 hours. It works. The real problem I have, and the reason we didn't go down that road, was with a ratchet mechanism. Basically, what it means is if I'm grasping, that means I hold my, I'm going to hold my water bottle, and so now it's ratchet, and so it's locked in that place. So that means I'm not necessarily exerting muscular force to hold it, but it does mean that my wrist is captured into this kind of catatonic sort of crimped position.
Right.
Which doesn't sound very pleasant. So what we were working with, and if you look, actually, I think we put this in, we may not have ever posted this, but we were looking at a slide latch, and somebody else looked at this too. There's a concept for a slide latch. We were looking at a rolling latch, basically both of which are just crimping systems for the control lines. And they work sorta. The hard part is getting all 5 control lines to always crimp at the same time, the same amount. And also, different people use different diameters of stuff for control lines. So if you go from the spectral line, some people use the spectral line, the fishing line. Some people use the curtain cord stuff. And so those different diameters mean you have a hard time crimping each one of those reliably and regularly. So I think there's something good in there. We lost inertia on it. And I would be more than happy, if somebody wants to take it, I'd be more than happy to give you guys where we got to, and you can throw it away or not. But I'd be more than happy to, because I think it's the thing that probably would have the best benefit, practically speaking, for a regular user.
Okay, yeah, like that would be extremely useful to us.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Laura, if you want to say anything about it. I think it would be really helpful for us to take a look at that and try to iterate more on that design.
Sure. If you can send me an email, or I don't know if we actually have email addresses because I don't understand Google Plus well enough. But but send me an email or send me a message on Google Plus, and I'll either post it to Thingiverse or something, or I'll email it to you or something. Do you guys use what modeling package do you guys use? We use SolidWorks. We're kind of dabbling with Fusion.
Like that's the one that I'm using.
Which one?
I'm using Fusion 360.
Okay.
Model.
Yeah, I should convert over. It's just we teach SolidWorks, and so I have a lot of inertia, and I'm lazy, and so I don't want to convert, but I probably should.
Adam, what is the Falcon model? What was that?
Yeah, the Falcon hand. If you look on Thingiverse, it's up there. There's a Falcon V1 and a Falcon V2. V2 is much more formalized.
Say again?
The V2 is much more formalized, but there's a cool feature in the V1. There's a guy named Bob Roth who shows up on the e-Nable forums. He came up with a wrist mechanism. We came up with it independently, and then we found out he'd done it first, so I have to give him credit. But basically, what we did was we created a hub. Just if you look at the Falcon V1, we created a hub at the top middle of the wrist. So basically, if you do radial ulnar deviation of your wrist, then you get two different grasp operations. Basically, you either get a pinch grasp or you get a three-finger grasp. And then if you just flex your wrist, you get a normal closure. It's a really slick system. We just the reason it's not in our version 2 that we released was that it was just going to take too much work to get it strong enough. And so we just said, you know what, let's get V2 out there, let people see what we're doing, and we'll come back and revisit the wrist mobility. The cool thing about it is it basically, you get total freedom of motion with your wrist from it. So you no longer are operating with a linear wrist brace. You have radial ulnar deviation again. So when we were playing around with it, you have full range of motion with your wrist. It's much more comfortable, but it also means you've got some stability issues. It requires more muscular strength to do the operations because it has a willingness to flop over to one side or the other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, maybe Gloria, would you like to speak about a little bit about, because you're dealing with these patients every day, some of the issues that you've seen with the current e-Nable hands we've been able to give you, and
yeah, so no, kind of what we've already just talked about. It would help a lot to have more degrees of freedom, so you can use your wrist for more functions and more power.
Right.
One of the things that we're working on is changing that so that you're not bending your wrist to hold on, because that's not the physiologically natural way you do it. So it's very hard for children. You're hanging on to something with your wrist flexed, and then you can't present it to anything. You can't put the ball down or do anything in that position. The other thing is the thumb position. For us, was a big problem because you can't do any of the fine motor things at all.
Right.
So those are the things we're working with.
Yeah. So we basically what we did on ours. This is actually the hand. We have a rotating thumb. So basically, it goes from the current Raptor thumb position to it'll go to give you the pinch grasp function.
That's awesome.
So there's a couple of other rotatable thumb solutions out there. There's one that the guys at Creighton University were looking at, and it had more of a vertical hub. I didn't like it as much, but I never printed it, so it may be just fine. I don't know. But that's one way of solving that grip position solution. My strings are all loose, so it's not actually closing very well right now. So this has been beaten into submission. But that's one way of solving it. The only thing I'm not sure of, and you're far more knowledgeable about the anatomy than I am, but it seems that from a musculature standpoint, you get my forearm muscles are much stronger grasping this direction. So do you lose, although it is a non-intuitive or it's a counter-optimal motion, do you not lose the offsetting benefit of stronger muscles that we have in flexion of the wrist?
So you're absolutely right. The extensor is the back of your forearm muscles are weaker, but it's more important to be able to present what you've got in your hand in space, to be able to do something with it. So
sure.
I think one thing everybody does is they over-exaggerate those wrist motions. So nobody works in full wrist bend or full wrist extension. We really all work a 30-degree plane around neutral, around the wrist being straight. So we really generate a lot more power in those 30 degrees than you can at the extremes.
Right, absolutely.
A really tight fist, your power grip is with about 5 degrees of extension of the wrist. So that's really where you expect your tightest grip to be. So it actually narrows your working range. You can't use all that extreme range of motion, but we don't use it either. So anatomically, you really can't expect anyone to be in 80 degrees of wrist extension or 80 degrees of wrist flexion to get their power. It's really got to be within that 30 degrees in either direction.
Right. Okay. No, that sounds. I mean, I'm really. It's not anything I thought about, but it makes a lot of sense. That's all I can say. Another thing that has been discussed, and this is. I'm sorry. Is that Luke? I think that's out in Maryland, right? Another thing that's been discussed is whether there's not a mechanism to go to a voluntary open rather than voluntary closed. That presents some musculature problems, but I do think that is the normal mechanism by which body-powered prostheses work. So that would be an interesting thing that I've seen people dabble with, but nobody really progress on a lot.
We did talk about that.
Yeah, to be honest, and you're right, that traditional clamps down to whatever you're holding, but we've stayed away from that mostly because the conventional prostheses, those terminal devices, either the hands or the hooks, are so ineffective. They don't do anything. They don't have different grasps. They don't do anything at all. So that's why so many upper limb users don't wear an upper limb prosthesis, because that terminal device is so not helpful. So
yeah, but a lot of them use the. I mean, those that do, they're using the hooks. I mean, these guys.
Right.
I mean, these guys are like, these are, let's see if I can get it in the right view. These guys are the workhorses. And so a lot of people reject, but the people who don't reject, they end up with the Hosmer hooks.
So if we can do something better than that with different grips, then I think it's worth going back to the more physiologic, which may take a little bit more strength generation. People will have to kind of work up to it. But if we're going to have better grips, like you're talking about pinch and key and spherical grip, then we should be more physiologic, because then, you know, we're going to want to pick up.
Absolutely. No, I think that's great.
And it looks like Adam's able to get his video working. Like, Adam, can you hear us?
Luke?
Or not Luke.
Nope, I'm Adam.
Luke. Sorry about that. Luke, can you hear us? Camera crashed. Okay.
There you go.
But he's on mute. You're on mute though, Luke.
Like, we're just talking about improvements that we could make to the existing e-Nable hands. You said that you had printed out a couple of like Raptors at University of Maryland. So like, what sort of problems did you encounter with the whole process?
Just as a heads up, guys, I'm about to get on the road, and so I can listen, but I won't be able to see, and I definitely can't see what's in chat windows. So, I'll have to not participate on chat window stuff. I apologize.
Okay, that's fine. Like, I'll be reading out what's on the chat anyway.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Luke just said that. So, like, he said he encountered some problems mainly due to the tension between the finger parts. Could you elaborate on that? There we go. So he's looking into attaching a ball and socket joint attached to the gauntlet. So like what purpose would that be for transradial movement of the wrist?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Let me know if there's too much static going on in the background.
No, it's great now. It's much better.
Okay, perfect. So basically, yes, as I said, I printed out 3 successful prints of the Raptor. In addition to like extending that and saying how can I actually improve the printing process, that would be with the CAD design. I was sort of thinking if, as you showed yours, I think Adam, in your new design, he was showing something with a ball and socket joint, and I'm thinking that's a much more suitable design for the Raptor, but I'm not sure if anyone else previously has been working on that for the Raptor specifically. I've seen in e-Nable's Google Plus pages, some people have been posting different designs for that, and I've seen ball and socket joints involved. So I wasn't sure if I could like join someone else who's been working on incorporating that design into the Raptor.
Where you're talking
so
about
yeah,
the ball.
actually, if you go ahead.
I'm sorry. Can you describe where you're? I'm not clear where you're referring to the ball and socket going.
Okay, so I don't have my hand with me at the moment, but attached to the gauntlet on all 4 of the fingers, not the thumb, but the 4 fingers where it's attached to the gauntlet, I'm considering incorporating a ball and socket joint there. And so the tension would just be on the, yeah.
Like, so like what sort of purpose, like what sort of additional functionality are you thinking that the ball and socket joint would add?
I'm thinking, well, I'm also having trouble like getting my MakerBots, the Ultimakers. They're not the most efficient for 3D printing, obviously, but I'm trying to get some kind of design where we wouldn't have to deal with, this sanding process. I'm sure you're all very accustomed to with MakerBots. Just to get some kind of design where I wouldn't have to deal with that, so that would reduce the tension. And I was thinking that not only would the ball and socket joint reduce the rafts that come with the print, it would also make it easier as a function of the hand itself. But I think a lot of you have already encountered that. So if anyone could point me in a better direction in regards to better prints.
So it seems like you're focusing on sort of printability aspects, the design for printability, for lack of a better term. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yes, and the CAD itself.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think you talk about there being issues with the with the sanding, and I think the one thing to be that we have to maintain an awareness of is that the Ultimaker produces some of the best prints. So as bad as it is for us, it gets worse ever reasonably good printers. So I think that's one of the issues I have with the Raptor, is that it's extremely sloppy and it's extremely noisy. And so I think that's kind of what you're getting at. And so I'm not entirely, frankly, clear what you're talking about with the ball and socket joint. I think I'm just not following along. But I would say conceptually focusing on improving printability and ease of assembly after printing is very valuable.
Okay. Yeah. Also, I was wondering if there were other researchers who were focusing on printability and improving the CAD design for that. I haven't noticed anyone focus. Yeah, go ahead, Akil.
So I saw this last night. Andreas was working with the designer of the Eagle hand. I don't know who that was, but Andreas was working with him to sort of work on printability aspects of the Eagle hand and how that hand could be modified to make it more printable. And so I think sort of in that same path, that might be a good starting point. I don't know, Jordan or Gloria, if you have any other input to add.
Yeah, I think the main thing is just try to focus on the design you want first, and this is a really good workflow of rapid prototyping. You print it out, you try the design. If it doesn't work just right, you modify it before you worry about the printability. You can also, one of the things we're starting to explore a bit more in Fusion 360 is actually animating the way that the fingers and the hand would grasp. You can assign rigid body mechanics to the parts on the computer, and that could help you test the design before you go to the trouble of trying to print it. So that might help.
You're talking about it.
Go ahead.
You're talking about a simulation. You're talking about an animated simulation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that might help you to decrease your print time.
And I would argue that one of the things that we are lacking, and as an engineer, I'm as guilty as anybody, because it's not the most fun part of it, but we have not done a good job of actually doing the engineering and analysis of how we're transferring loads and how we're asking people, basically, how do we optimize the designs for range of motion or for power, depending on what you want. And that has to do with a lot of the proportionalities, where the strings run with respect to joints, stuff like that. But a good simulation simply doesn't exist, to the best of my knowledge, that we can work with to say, hey, if we want to trade off power for smaller range of motion, we need to do this, or vice versa. So I think simulation would be another, it's one I hadn't thought of, but it'd be another very interesting direction to go that would make the design process a lot more robust.
Okay. In that regard, load testing, and Adam, are you referring to some sort of failure analysis, because right now I'm a member of the Center for Advanced Life Cycle Engineering at the University of Maryland, and I'm considering like approaching the director with some of the models and asking him if I can like perform some kind of testing with their equipment. You mentioned loading issues, and what parts of the model are you referring to?
Okay, yeah, so I was referring in that context, it's a different answer, but in that context what I was referring to was the muscular demand, basically the trade-off between, it's a gear basically, right, or it's a lever arm, and so the more distance I go, the more, you know, the more torque I can support, the more load I can carry. So that's what I was referring to in that context. And so I was referring in that context specifically to more musculature loading, how much the muscles are carrying. But what you're talking about is a different issue. And the long and the short is there is no good data at all on these things right now. There is nothing, frankly, and I have an IRB that actually just got approved. I don't want to do survey data; it's not interesting to me. But there's a great glaring hole that we don't know. First of all, we don't know how many of these things are printed, but we don't have any control over that. But what we also don't know is once these things are handed off to kids, do they like them longer than the first 30 minutes when they got them and they look cool? We don't know whether, you know, a month later they're still using them, they're still providing value. We don't know whether they've broken in the first 2 weeks. We don't know whether they're able to repair them. We don't know really, as far as I can tell, and this is, I've talked to a lot of people in the community, we don't really have any good data of what happens after the photo op where we hand off a hand. And so there's a huge amount of question of work, and some of it could be laboratory work of material analysis and failure studies and putting things on instrons, and some of it is simply the boring legwork of, you know, the survey of, you know, you send it out to, you hope to get a lot of responses, and you say, is your kid still wearing this? And if so, what's it doing? And has it broken? And how have you fixed it? And that sort of stuff. Because honestly, we're redesigning under a bunch of assumptions that may be grossly invalid.
So I agree with you. This is Gloria again. I agree with you 100%. So we're doing a similar, we're not doing a survey study, but we've got an IRB for just a short term, like a 3-month-long trial period where a kid gets it the way we've been handing them out, but then we do very standardized testing with them. So dexterity testing, questionnaires specifically designed for upper limb deficiencies, saying, you know, can you do anything better with it on or not? For that same exact, trying to get the same exact answer. Did the coolness last more than the first hour? And are you still wearing it a week later? Do they come back in a month with, you know, an envelope full of dust, or do they come back wearing their hand and actually being able to do things with it? And then how much do they just need time and training to learn to use it, and how much is it just they can't make it work at all? So we definitely need some clinical input to guide a lot of these design things, because I agree with you 100%. We're designing in the dark in the lab, but we don't have any clinical input.
Right.
And also, like, while we're on the subject of testing, there was a project that Gloria approached me about, which was being able to measure the grip forces on the hand. Because as far as I know, there is no existing data about how much force it takes for example, me to hold, you know, an apple, or to hold in different positions. Because like once we know the grip forces that the normal hand experiences, then we can then design something which will have the same grip force when a prosthetic hand is doing that.
Yeah, you'll probably find, I know I've seen some data on, you know, ADL type study, activities of daily living type studies for what able-bodied people do, because I looked into it back when I was, so I've only been teaching 3 years. I ran a prosthetics R&D company before that, but as far as the functionality of the devices, that's a different question. And there's one guy. There was a guy who put together or proposed some test rigs, and he did some kind of anecdotal level tests. And he may still be around. I don't know. I just discovered yesterday that my filter that I have on Google was filtering out all of my e-Nable messages, and that explains why I didn't hear from anybody. But there was some work to kind of create a standardized system, and if I remember right, he came up with some way of basically creating an easily replicable, I think that's a word, test rig to say, hey, I've designed a new hand or I've printed a hand, can it hold 5 pounds, can it hold 10 pounds? The one data point we have is that I know of is Peregrine, who is kind of the Uber user that you'll see floating around periodically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's been able to hold, if I remember right, he's able to hold like 10-pound weights, like barbell type weights. And his limitation is not the hand itself, it's the socket, it's the retention scheme. That's where it's failing for him to go beyond that. But he also has a highly modified Talon hand that basically he and Peter Binkley have put together that are, so it's this super robust, like bulletproof version that works great, but it looks like a tank because it behaves like a tank.
Right. And like when you said that the problem was the socket itself, could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's just that it pulls off, right? So when I say he was able to hold 10 pounds, it's that he was able to curl his fingers around a 10-pound weight and pick it up vertically. And I'm not talking about a lot of manipulation. It's not like he was spinning it around or anything like that, but he was able to pick it up. And then, but anything in excess of that, basically, the friction socket that we have for lack of a better term, socket that we have that we're using for retention for e-Nable hands, it just slides off after some limit.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay.
And Adam, when you're referring to a limit, you're referring to the weight, right, of the load itself.
Yeah, exactly. And I also want to be very clear that, as I said, that is one guy, so that's not what I think we traditionally call a statistical sampling. And it's also on a non-standard hand. So a Raptor may or may not be able to support 10 pounds. Another question is a Raptor that I print may not support 10 pounds, but one that you print might support 10 pounds. Or one that I print in PLA might not support it, but one that you print in ABS might be able to. Or who knows what. There's so many variables. There's so many variables that's another study. So I'm working with a professor at University of Washington. She has a student on an REU this summer, and we're doing basically functional material testing, comparing, print layouts. We're comparing, inter-printer variability and material strength, and it's not specifically related to e-Nable, but it's at this point I can't put a model into FEA and say, oh, it's going to be strong enough, because I don't know. I know what the tensile strength of PLA filament is, but that has absolutely nothing to do with what the material limits of an e-Nable hand are going to be.
Well, it also goes back on the clinical side. Does a typical 6-year-old kid need to lift 10 pounds with one hand? Because there's the other aspect of it, is the clinical need.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
10 pounds to swing a baseball bat in Little League. We don't know.
Right, and this is something that gets lost in the noise, and this goes back to this vocational work that we're trying to work on. But when a prosthetist is fitting a device, the first thing that is asked is not what hand do you want, it's what do you want to be able to do?
What do you do with
because it may not be a hand at all. It may be a hook may be enough, or you might need the myoelectric hand, or you might need something else completely. If you look at what Oscar Pistorius runs on, it doesn't look anything like a human foot.
Right.
It looks like a giant carbon fiber seat, but it works really well for what he wants to be able to do. He's not really best person to be talking about these days, I recognize, but he's still a
But he
good
was such a
example.
great example before.
Exactly. He's all I got right now. So
That goes
anyway,
to,
so
that goes to,
you know the question.
yeah, I
Go
think
ahead.
3D printing is a great way to address that because you're right. One of the biggest limitations is variability. A hook doesn't work for everybody, and a certain type of foot doesn't work for everybody. You need to have different options.
Exactly. And so if you look, there's been a recent series of, there's been two particular things that I've watched recently. One was a kid who wanted to play baseball, and one was a guy who wanted to be able to, I forgot what he wanted to be able to do, it was something else. But there has been some work towards making these very specific modifications that have nothing to do with making something that looks like a hand. But if you want to be able to play baseball, what you need to be able to do is grasp the ball, and so you're trying to close the glove around the ball and then release that. Well, that's not most easily done with an e-Nable hand, but it is possible to do with the range of motion we have. So, you know, solving the problem the person wants solved is more important than anything else, and that tends, I think that gets lost because of the inertia of the e-Nable community. I mean, we started building partial hands, and in reality the community of partial hands is somewhere between a really, really small number and slightly more than a really, really small number. That is not the greatest population of need, but we're doing it, and that's okay. And so, you know, but even within that, you know, the kid who's missing fingers, the vast majority of kids who are missing fingers, they've already figured out how to do most of what they need to do in life. But there's usually one or two things like climbing on the monkey bars or riding their bike or picking up a baseball that they really wish they could do. And so the answer in some cases, maybe even in most cases, I really don't know, we don't have any data on this, is not how do I make a better hand, but the question is how do I expand maybe the repository of random stuff we can make? You know, maybe it's how do I hold a cricket bat because I want to be able to play cricket. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and I think a partial hand is a great way to start, just because I believe that the limiting factor to a lot of upper limb prostheses is that terminal device. So if a partial hand can be made in a different way, whether it be anthropomorphic or not, and it's functional, then we can apply that as we work our way up the chain and go to transradial amputations and all the way higher up. But I think having it kind of a menu of terminal devices that work well, that give you different grips, that can affect different functions is a great place to start.
Yeah, the only counterpoint to that is that partial hands are they're a lot more variable. If you look at the congenitals, you tend to have a lot of yeah, for lack of a better term, nubs. You know, little like tiny little partial fingers, which are hard to work around. Or if it's a traumatic amputation, which in general we, as a community, we try and limit the amount of traumatic work we do. Though the stuff I'm doing in Syria, you don't have a lot of choice in the matter. Traumatic is a much more erratic thing. So a transradial amputee is in some ways more predictable than a partial hand. But I agree with your point 90%. The only caveat I have is that most of the partial hand, there seems to be a lot of variability in what we mean by partial hand. Sometimes it makes the design process really hard.
Very true.
So actually, relating to what you said about the partial fingers or the nubs, this summer I was sort of, one thing I was investigating is to see like whether you can create a slot in the existing like Raptor reloaded palm and create an like extension device for the partial digit, and so the patient would be able to independently operate their partial digit while still integrating with the existing Raptor palm.
Yeah, I think that's a really, we've actually got a patient we've been struggling with that exact problem. He lost most of his middle three fingers, but not all of them, and so he has exactly the wrong length. You know, it's just a little bit too long to just kind of jam his hand into a Raptor palm, and it's a little too short to actually do anything with. So, I mean, a good starting point, if you look on the e-Nable community, there's a design called the Owen finger. So Ivan Owen developed a partial finger solution. So some implementation of that into a Raptor palm might be really interesting.
So with the Owen replacement finger, one thing I noticed is that you need a tensioning cord to tie it off onto the existing like the partial finger, but there's like non-enable, but there's existing processes out there where I think one is called the X finger.
X finger, yeah.
Simply just like rotate the partial finger, and that in itself will cause the flexion around the, I think, the interphalangeal joint. That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So like.
So yeah, I mean the X finger, aside from the fact that the dude has a patent on it, is a really great solution. I'm not clear whether there is a way of making it printable. But it would be a really cool thing to investigate if we can do it without violating that guy's intellectual property.
Right.
The reality is the X finger is the only partial finger solution that exists. And I have talked to one prosthetist who's fit one of them. And I think some of that, oops, hang on a second. Sorry. I think some of that comes down to the fact that if you have a partial finger, it's just not worth your time to put this thing on and off. That may be part of it. I really don't know, but they're not moving a lot of them. That's all I know. But I think, you know, looking at the X finger as a model is very interesting. It's a linkage mechanism rather than a tendon-based mechanism, but that's not a bad thing. That's just what it is.
Right. Yeah, was there anything else?
So, I mean, I think we've gone through, Luke, to answer your question when you started, I think we've gone through like 10 different cool things to think about.
And
Okay.
Luke, are you working with certain labs at University of Maryland, or are you looking for a lab there?
Yeah, I'm currently working for the Center for Advanced Life Cycle Engineering. So we're focusing on load, not for specifically circuit boards, but we have a lot of equipment that I think could be used for e-Nable devices. So I have to present that first to my supervisor, but in the meantime, we have a makerspace at the university, and I'm hoping to utilize that for students who are interested in 3D printing. They see 3D printing as like their niche in mechanical engineering, so I'm hoping that e-Nable can be like their avenue to become accustomed to knowing how 3D printing works. So I'm looking at what kind of project would be a great way to introduce freshmen and sophomores into 3D printing through e-Nable, and they could work on some form of CAD as you guys have mentioned, some way of improving the print itself. I think sounds very appealing. But yeah, the things that you've mentioned, finding the, you know, IRB or some kind of statistical data that shows how the hands are actually used after, you know, they're photographed.
Yeah.
And that's one way, but also, yeah, just the loading after a certain amount of pounds or weight is applied. I think that could be a good way of introducing students to the device itself. Yeah, these are good ideas.
And another thing, if you're, I don't know whether you're talking about this in a class context or whether you're talking about this more in just in general, getting excited, but we did, you know, the hackathon we did here at UW was, you know, you don't have a lot of control over what they're going to work on because it's whatever they're interested in, but it was an awesome way of just kind of getting people aware of what was there, and you know, some totally random stuff came out of it, but a couple of really cool things came out of it too. So it might be an interesting way of, you know, getting some interest, particularly freshmen and sophomores who are not buried in classes yet, but they're interested in doing something engineering-y or science-y or technically that they don't normally have access to in freshman level classes.
Right. And what's appealing about 3D printing is also that it can cross over into, you know, the art majors or the medical majors. Make 3D printing less of a, you know, a Star Trek enthusiast's dream, you know, and make more of the creative side, you know, shine through. But yeah, I totally relate with that, Adam. It's it's something that can also, be like that shining point that brings people towards engineering, but it can go cross major as well.
Like, all right, guys. Well, this has been a pretty useful introduction session. I think like moving on in the future, obviously we'll try to get more people. Like I think the problem with like loading the Hangout was one problem. We didn't get many people, but also once we get more students in this Hangout session, then we can start doing like weekly reports where we all just kind of submit as a sort of a progress report of what we're doing, and then like in the next Hangout session, we could talk about what we did, and then we could discuss ideas. And I think I've been thinking of using GradCAD as a way to share like STL and other CAD files between the different researchers. Like, what do you guys think about that?
GradCAD?
Yeah.
I've used GradCAD, I think, on my phone. Is that what I'm thinking of? It's sort of just a viewer, or
no? Yes. So GradCAD is basically a GitHub. Well, it markets itself as a GitHub for mechanical engineers. So basically, it works kind of in the same way that GitHub does, where you have like different versions of the same sort of file that you put in. But an advantage it has over GitHub is that you're able to see and manipulate CAD files on the software itself, and so you can like measure distances. You could look at it from different orientations, and additionally, it allows you to download files into a more like CAD neutral file, so like a STEP versus like, for example, I can't download a SolidWorks file and then edit it like inside of Fusion.
That sounds awesome. I've been looking for something like that. I didn't know that existed, so that sounds great. I mean, the only caveat I'd say is depending on what people's interest is. Fusion does have its cloud collaborative capability, which I haven't used. But I mean, I could probably be dragged kicking and screaming into using Fusion if that's the consensus, and then we could standardize on their technology.
Yeah, I think the feeling we were talking to some of the e-Nable community people, including Marla Parker, who was saying she liked the idea of GradCAD, if we should try that to start with. So as we progress with these meetings, we'll work here at Rice to formalize more. So we'll start putting together an agenda for the next few meetings. Akil has some notes from today's meeting we'll be writing up. And then we'll just keep iterating and getting more and more professional as we go, having kind of set times for each presenter, and that should be.
Sounds great. And I want to apologize that I don't have any students on the line. I normally would try and back out more, but they're not starting until the 15th, so it'll be about 2 weeks before they show up.
We thought it was good just to get started, to figure out all the technical things, get familiar with each other, figure out the right scope for all of this. So I think it was really great today. Nice to meet you all. Thank you for joining.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for hosting.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. I guess we'll meet again next Wednesday at 3 p.m.
Okay. Sounds good.
Sounds good.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
We'll send out another invite.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye.